Welcome to the eighth episode of the Javid Podcast. Today, my guest is Mark Johnston. Mark is a serial entrepreneur who, if I'm not mistaken, is involved with his seventh company right now. He previously worked for 16 years as president, managing director, and chief operational officer for multiple cell and stem cell therapy companies, a drug discovery tools company, and a contract manufacturing business. He also spent 10 years in multiple operational roles for a French biotechnology firm, which was acquired by Thermo Fisher Corporation, and worked as an entrepreneur in residence for a life science focused venture capital firm just after graduating from business school. He's currently CEO of Biomed X Institute in the US. Welcome, Mark. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Javid. I'm happy to be here. Nice to see you again.
Same. I kind of gave you a brief introduction, but I really want you to, explain yourself, give us your background in your own words. And I guess we can start from your educational background,
Sure. I mean, your audience might be asking the question, how does somebody who got a undergraduate degree at the University of Maryland in the late 80s in, essentially this hodgepodge of engineering, math, and physics, how does he end up running a bunch of biotech companies? So let me try to take you on that pathway, because it is quite interesting and fun a lot of times. So I went to University of Maryland. I got a what is called the physical sciences degree. And back in the 80s, that meant, at least at the University of Maryland, an engineering undergrad from freshman year to junior year. And then senior year, I broke away from engineering and I took math and physics senior level classes. And I did that because I didn't want to be pigeonholed into a typical mechanical engineering sort of job. I sort of figured that out by junior year. So it was important that I transferred over to the physical sciences to take these other classes. I'm glad I did that, because as I was interviewing for different jobs, most of the jobs I was interviewing for were for like HVACs, companies. And I try to imagine what my life would be like if I'd gone that route. What I ended up doing was working for a life science company. And this was the first job that I got out of college. We were designing ultra pure water systems for laboratory buildings. So I really tripped and fell into the life science and biotech space because of that job. And it really allowed me to interact with doctors, PhDs, engineers, of course. And I really enjoyed that job. And my boss saw something my boss saw something in me and said, maybe you should get into the life sciences, lab equipment business. So I ended up leaving that job, and I ended up working for a life science tools company. It's a French-based company. We were very small. We had a subsidiary in the United States, just out of Washington, D.C. So I started working there as a salesperson. And I did sales for 3 years, and I was top salesperson for 3 years. And my boss did something I never thought he would do, which is take his top salesperson out of the field and make him a sales manager, which seemed quite illogical to me. But anyway, I took that job, and I only realized then that he was grooming me to be a senior level manager in the company. And so as a sales manager, I did that for a year, and then he moved me to manager of product management, then to marketing, customer service, technical service. So I was learning all these different aspects of a company, how a company should actually be run and how it operates. And so I did that for 9 years. One of the cool things about that job was we kept acquiring all these little small mom and pop life science tools companies in Europe. And I got to go to Europe all the time, and I got to sort of integrate after the acquisitions. I got to integrate different departments, divisions, whatever the technologies needed to be into the sort of overall company. And I really, really enjoyed that. What I was never involved in was the pre-acquisition side. And that seemed really cool to me. And so I asked my boss, how do I do that? He's like, well, if you want to do that, you need one of two things, a law degree or an MBA. And I said, well, I don't want to be a lawyer. So I looked at the MBA programs, and having spent so much time in Europe, I knew that I wanted to get an education at a European business school. I really loved the culture, the different cultures. I really loved, interacting with different people in the different languages. It was just really cool and fun for me. So I was looking for an MBA. And really, there were, at that point, I was 33 years old. So I was an old man going to the MBA program. And I knew that spending 2 years, without a paycheck and spending a couple $100,000 on the MBA, I knew that I would have to go to a top program if I wanted to recoup anything. And I also didn't want to, have to compete with a bunch of 23 and 24-year olds. Um, so I ended up I looked at two schools, INSEAD, which is in Paris. It's actually not in Paris; it's outside of Paris, and then London Business School, which is center of London. And it was a really vibrant city, and the school was really cool because it was very diverse. We had 300 people in my class with, I want to say, from 70 countries that were represented there, and half the population were female, and that was a very, very different profile than the U.S. schools that I was looking at. The second thing that was different is that the age of the people going to London Business School is higher than in the United States. They tend to take time, at least in Europe, take a little time off, go work, and then come back with work experience under their belt. And in the US MBA programs, you see more often than not people leaving immediately from their undergrad into the MBA. And I thought, if I was going to do this right, go to a top school, but also learn from the people that are around you. And the people that were around me were experienced, and they were from all different industries, and they had a lot of experience to bring to the game. So for me, London Business School was really an amazing opportunity. So I went there, and in between the 2-year MBA program, I worked for a venture capital firm for my summer internship. And at the end of that period, they asked me to come back and work for them. So I went back to the MBA program for a year, finished, came back, and I started working as an entrepreneur in residence for this venture capital firm, which was focused exclusively in biotechnology and the life sciences area. So we'd had like 15 different companies in our portfolio that were focused on various disease areas, but also focused on specific cell types. So I was parachuted into this company in North Carolina. What was supposed to be a 3-month project to turn the company around, sell it, or shut it down because it was running out of money. And this company was a liver stem cell company. And at that point, I really didn't know what the liver was. I knew that it filtered bad stuff out of our body, but that was the extent of my science, my knowledge in the liver science. So I ended up going down to North Carolina, and I was parachuted into this company of 6 people. And they were all focused on developing a therapeutic product. What we would do is we would get livers in that were not suitable for transplantation purposes, and then the livers were donated by the organ donor. And they checked on their box that the liver could be used for either for transplant purposes or for research purposes. So since we were a research company and we weren't doing therapeutics at that point, we were getting those kind of livers. So those livers would come in, we would stick a chemical into the liver, it would break the liver down into its cellular components, and then we would fish out what we called a stem cell. And that stem cell was only about 1% of the entire liver mass. So our idea was to take that 1% of the liver mass, we would expand it, differentiate it, and then transplant that into patients so that we could conceivably take one liver that was not good enough for transplantation and treat hundreds of patients. That was our objective. So anyway, that 1% of those stem cells was our therapeutic product that we were developing. Then there was the other 99% of the cells that were not being used. And so those cells were hepatocytes and human hepatocytes. And so what we were doing was putting human hepatocytes into dish, and then we would start selling them to pharmaceutical companies for drug discovery and toxicology testing. And so this was one of the ways that I was able to start bringing revenues into this company so that we could then afford to focus on our therapeutic company. Yeah. So that's really how I got into a second company at that point. So we had the therapeutic stem cell company, and then I spun out this liver cell in a dish tools company. Right. And so that's really how I started getting, really saving the company. So I didn't have to shut it down. I didn't have to sell it. Yeah. So I spun out the second company. I now have 2 companies. We're all under one roof. But we're using the same raw material that's coming in. This liver comes in, the research team isolates the cells, and then we take the hepatocytes and give it to company 2, and we keep the liver stem cells for company one for our therapeutic program. So I did that from 2004 until about 2006. I then met a German company that needed access to primary liver cells for therapeutic purposes. Now, at this point, I'm taking these primary liver cells, putting them in a dish, and selling them to pharmaceutical companies for drug discovery purposes, as I mentioned. So I thought, wow, it'd be really cool if we could utilize some of these liver cells for therapeutic purposes by partnering with this German company. So the German company and my company, we signed an agreement where we would start manufacturing the German company's therapeutic liver cell product for them for a fee. And then they would then start transplanting those cells into patients for therapeutic purposes. And that was, to me, really, really cool. It was the first time I'd actually gotten into a kind of business where we were actually treating patients. And it was really very rewarding to be part of that. So we did that. Then sold that company. I sold my company to the German company in 2008. And then we sort of became subsumed by them and started running clinical trials in the United States using that same liver cell product to treat kids that had a very, very rare liver genetic disorder. So we did that till about 2015. And then we ran into a Belgian stem cell therapy company that was competing with us. And we thought, well, I think we'd do better if we were sort of working together. So we ended up merging the companies. And we started doing, we now had multiple products where we took stem cell products, primary liver cell products, and other cell products that we would treat various liver disorders. So, fatty liver disease, acute liver failure, this liver genetic disorder that I was telling about. So I did that up until 2020. And then I found this really cool technology. Sorry, I need to take a step back. During that same period, after we merged with the Belgian company, I spun out another company, and that company was also providing primary cells, but instead of just liver cells, we started providing kidney cells and lung cells and intestinal cells, all for drug discovery purposes to help improve the pharmaceutical development process. Yeah, so did that. Then in 2020, I found this really cool technology that was a sort of gene editing technology. And I licensed that out from university. And then I started to I was building my business plan, obviously, and I started to try to raise money. The problem was it was right in March of 2020, just before COVID. So it wasn't great timing, but I ended up spending about a year and a half trying to raise money for that company. I got about 25% of the funds I needed. And to start, I needed 50%, and I only got to 25. So at that point, I ended up doing some consulting roles. I gave the intellectual property back to the university, and I started doing some consulting roles. And I ran into my friend who I'd been talking to for years. He and I had done the German acquisition back in 2008. So, and we've been friends ever since. Anyway, he started this company called Biomed in Germany. And it was a really cool concept. It was working with large pharmaceutical companies to try to solve very big problems to which there are no solutions. And if we could create a solution to this problem or challenge, then it would be a major game changer, either across the entire pharmaceutical company or the therapeutic area that was having the particular problem. So anyway, he asked me to start Biomedics in the US because we had Biomedics in Germany, and it was now time to expand. And so he asked me to set up Biomedics US. And in about 3 seconds after the conversation started, I said, yes, I will do it, because he's a great guy, really smart. And I really love working with him. So I started doing that. So it's the reason that I'm actually here in Connecticut. I was looking to set up the Biomedics Institute in the United States. And what we needed to do to make our project successful, we needed to have a couple of critical factors. Number one, we needed to be adjacent to a top medical school so that we could get access to that medical school's core facilities, because they have $1 million pieces of equipment that we could never afford, but we needed that equipment to actually do the really deep science that we were doing. So that was one factor. Another factor was are we close to our pharmaceutical partners? And that reason that's important because at Biomed we work really hand in hand with our pharmaceutical partner to develop a solution to this problem. You know, a lot of times when the pharmaceutical companies want to do these kinds of projects, they'll outsource it to an academic laboratory. They give them money. They meet like every 6 months for a report and then they walk away. That's not what we do at Biomedics. At Biomedics, we work hand in hand with the pharmaceutical company because we want them to be part of the development process and we want them to buy into the solution that we're creating. So we ended up choosing a location that was going to be close to our pharmaceutical partners. And the third thing that was, I think, important was we needed to be in a area that was cost effective. Boston, New York, San Francisco, they just weren't going to work. And that was simply based on the fact that we use our pharmaceutical company sponsors this project. And so 100% of those funds that come in sponsor the team that we build to create this solution. They pays the rent, salaries, everything. So we needed to, and the money that we get, by the way, from the pharmaceutical companies, it's not a lot. I mean, it's a small amount that we have to spread over 6 people on a team. That includes, you know, the salaries and the rent and the consumables, lab equipment. So it's not a lot of money, but when I continued to look for other sites, New Haven really popped out because of Yale and access to the core facilities. It's very, very affordable. I know this is Connecticut, and when people see on television Connecticut shows, it's all these very, very wealthy people. New Haven's affordable. Yeah? And we were between New York, Pennsylvania, and Boston, which is where all of our pharmaceutical partners reside. So it was at that point, it was a no-brainer to choose New Haven. And so that's why we're here. And so we're now working on a couple of tissue engineering projects. We've got, well, I probably shouldn't say specifically. That might be a problem with our sponsors. So anyway, we're working on a couple of tissue engineering projects in wound healing and fibrosis and immunology. Those are the things that we're doing here. So
That's Mike. This is extremely informative and so cool. Thank you so much for all this information. Actually, you said so many things, and where like it just created more and more questions in my head. One of them, first of all, I want to clarify. You said when you did the 2008 selling of the company, right? It's a German acquisition. By the way, the 2008 financial crisis period, I don't know how you guys managed to do the deal during that period, but kudos to you guys. So it was the therapy you were developing was like 1% was for stem cells, and then 99% was like the cell lines to test for pharmaceutical companies. The ones that you made a deal with the German company was for the stem cells, or was for the cell lines? Just to clarify for myself again.
So sorry. Let me be more clear. Sorry, I probably explained that wrong. So we took stem cells, and that was for my previous company's therapeutic product. Then and that was from 2004 till about 2006. All right. From 2004 to 2006, we used the other 99% of those cells. We put them into Petri dishes and sold them to pharmaceutical companies for drug discovery purposes. In 2006, we started manufacturing the German company's medicinal products. So we were no longer taking cells and putting them in dishes. We were now making cell product under good manufacturing processes, freezing the cells, and then we would ship those cells to different clinical sites where they would thaw them and then inject them into kids that had this very rare genetic disorder. So it's really 2006 to 2008, we were essentially a contract manufacturing business. Yeah. I see. In 2008, we essentially sold, we carved out the contract manufacturing business and sold that to the German company. And then me and 80% of my staff moved with the German company. So essentially we became acquired by them.
I see. Makes sense. And, you know, what's fascinating to me is that so many decisions you've made are quite like, it shows that you understand the business. I mean, you spend so much time in the biotechnology sector, so you understand the business well. But, you know, when I look at the executives, especially in the venture capital, but even in the biotech, you see a lot of people with PhDs and MDs, right? But I mean, you are a living testament that you don't need an MD or PhD advanced degree to be a successful biotech executive, right? So how did you navigate, you know, like the scientific question, right? One of the decisions you made, you said like you found a gene editing company, and you licensed it out of the university. How did you know like this technology was the technology that you had to like license out and actually develop, right? So without actually being, let's say having a PhD in molecular genetics or whatever. So that's what I'm curious about. Like, when do you need an advanced degree, and is it even necessary, right?
Mhm. So let me answer that question, because I was quite concerned when I left my MBA, and now all of a sudden I'm president of this life science, this therapeutic biotech
Mm.
company that's
Yeah,
focused on liver
yeah,
disease, a disease I don't know
yeah,
anything about. How to, I, I,
yeah.
what I took from my MBA was, you don't need to be an expert on everything. You can just surround yourself with excellent people. If you're
Hmm.
open-minded and listen to them, you're gonna do a good job as a manager, or you hopefully will do a good
Hmm.
job as a manager.
Yeah,
So that's sort
yeah.
of the way that I looked at it. And going back to your question, you're right. A lot of these small biotech companies are started by MDs or PhDs, but what you see happening over about a year after the initial tranche of cash goes in, then they start
Hmm.
bringing
Hmm.
in business people. And so that's where I
Business
came in.
side.
So I had spent, 9 years at that French biotechnology company, learning operations, learning how a company
Obviously.
integrates and work. And so when the venture capital firm parachuted me into this company, they weren't looking for expert scientists. We
I
had that
see.
at the
I see.
company. They
Yeah,
needed
yeah.
somebody that understood operations. They needed somebody
Mm.
that could grow this company and sell it
Mm.
eventually, because that's what VCs want to do, right? They want to invest and they
Yeah,
want to sell. So a lot of times
yeah.
PhDs and MDs, they don't have the business skills to actually do that. So it is, you're not a even though I was president or CEO, I still am surrounded by a team of people that are MDs, PhDs, experts in the particular area. And as a team, we're going to meetings. As a team, we're presenting. As a team. So that's I think the critical answer to your question is that
Yeah,
you're not doing this alone in a vacuum. You have to be
I see.
surrounded by a team. So
Mm.
at the C-level suite in a biotech company, you are having PhDs and MDs. There's no question of that, but you're also having,
Mm.
the CFO
Mm.
is not a scientist. The CFO is
I
somebody
see.
so
Yeah,
you have people that have operational and business experience, and that's what I brought to the game. Yeah.
I see. I see. That's really cool. And like when just going back to the previous point, you said you licensed out the gene editing company and you want to develop it, right? How did you come up with that idea? And when you raise funds, right, from investors, I mean, obviously you spend a significant amount of time in the biotech sector, so you do have a kind of built a name and reputation for yourself. But for somebody who is new, right, and who doesn't have a PhD or MD, do they face any challenges when they don't have advanced degrees and they want trying to raise funds for their company, for their startup?
So to answer that question, just having the PhD doesn't guarantee you anything. It does not
I see.
guarantee you money at the
Okay.
VC level, right?
I
What
see.
you
I
need
see.
to do, so there's two questions embedded in there. The first is, how did I find this technology? I found the
Yeah.
technology accidentally. It
Hmm.
was I was actually weirdly interviewing at this university for a job, and part of the interviewing process, they gave me a bunch of patents, and I had to create presentations and sell them on what would I do with this technology. And one of those technologies was this gene editing technology. And so I thought, what would be cooler than going to work at this university would be starting another company. And
Uh,
that's why I
I
licensed
see.
that technology. So to answer that question, but
That's really cool.
again, when you're out looking for venture capital money, and doing it right in front of the pandemic was is a little challenging. But again,
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
to build your team. And so for me, I got the senior scientists that actually developed the technology. I got them on board. We were presenting together. It was a group of us that were sitting in front of
I see.
these VCs, and that's the
Yeah.
story, because
Mm.
you have to build the story that the VCs want. But you
Yeah.
also have to have behind you the skill sets to be able to deliver on that. The
Yeah.
VCs
Yeah.
understand, and when they're doing their due diligence, they will look at everything, and
Yeah.
people, of course, management team, of course, the technology, of course, what's the market. I mean,
Mm.
these are all of the standard things that one puts in a business plan, right? So
I see.
essentially, that's how we went out and started looking for capital. Is really just building the business plan based on those factors.
That's pretty cool. And Like obviously, company is a company, right? The basic model is the same: revenue, cost, profit, right? That's the entire premise. But biotechnology firms are very complex in nature, right? It takes a longer timeline to develop the product. There's a higher rate of failure. I think the average timeline for drug development takes like 10 to 15 years to the market, right? With all the regulations and all that. And like, is there a lot of uncertainty? So how do you navigate it as a successful entrepreneur,
Yeah. Yeah. It's so you're right. It does take 10 to 15 years. You're not generating revenues. You're
Yeah.
hoping that your idea actually comes to fruition and then you get it finally to the clinic. Maybe it works,
Yeah.
maybe it doesn't work, right?
Mm,
So you have to stay alive during that period. And that's
mm,
just, it's just a roller coaster in terms of raising money. And I found
mm,
myself spending most of my time raising capital from VCs. The second I finished a financing round, I was immediately starting
mm.
the next financing round because I
Next
didn't
one.
know how long it was going to be, how long that money was going to last. We thought that that money would last, this period of time, but things happen. And sometimes the money, you
Yeah.
spend it faster. So
Yes.
I was constantly doing that. I was constantly going out and talking to VCs and raising money. And I honestly, I didn't like that. I came from a world where we manufactured product and sold it and generated money and made profit. That for me was a world that
Yeah.
I lived in. This biotech space was
Yeah.
so different for me. So I did
Mm,
the only thing I knew how to do, which was to figure out how to bring revenues. And that's when I was talking earlier about being parachuted into this liver stem cell company and taking that 1% of those cells that was specific to the therapeutic product. What are we doing with
mhm,
this other 99%? It just seemed like we're throwing them into a freezer and not using them. And I knew that the pharmaceutical industry needed a humanized model that they could test their
mhm,
drugs on because they were testing them on animals or insect cells, models that were not really reflective of human physiology. So
mhm,
creating a human liver in a dish, I knew would
mhm,
allow these pharmaceutical companies to test metabolism and toxicity, and they could screen bad drugs out or potentially learn which drugs were actually going to be effective, right?
mhm, mhm,
Minimizing that. But in general, we knew that there needed to be a tool that the
mhm,
pharma companies could use. So I thought, well, gosh, we've got all of these cells sitting in a freezer. Let's do something with it. So, oh, and I didn't really tell you this, but so the 6 people that were on the therapeutic team, I told them, stop doing what you're doing. And I
mhm,
shifted them over to, we need to make cells in a dish that we can sell to pharmaceutical companies. And we did that
mhm.
very, very quickly. And we had very
Okay.
good success, actually, very, very quickly. So much so that I was able to convince the venture capital firm that we were generating enough revenues that I should spin out a second company, which is what I did. So I spun out the second company, which was making these life science tool. This is liver cells in a dish. And then I took those 6 people and I moved them back to therapeutics. So at this point, I had
Mhm,
2 companies that were focused on a therapeutic and the tool. And I had revenues coming in that was going to
mhm,
help us with our therapeutic program because it was still one company.
mhm.
Yeah.
So
Now,
yeah.
so well, it wasn't really one company; it was 2 companies. But the life science tools companies paid the therapeutic company for
Mhm,
access to those liver cells, and so that's how I was
mhm,
able to keep that therapeutic company going, but at the same time build revenues. And again, that's all I really know. I really enjoy doing that, building revenue, building products that generate revenues, and that's the way that we sort of flattened out this sort of roller coaster of trying to raise money all the time for the therapy, the very expensive, time consuming, therapeutic, non revenue generating entity.
I see. I see.
If that you
And
understand.
that's pretty cool. You mentioned venture capitalists and all that a lot, so I think I'm gonna ask a question about that too. And I know some people, feel differently about it. I'm curious about your opinion, right? Like, what do you feel about VC firms? What do you feel about raising funds from them? And also, overall, like, where does the capital for the biotech firms mainly come from? I know you can make partnerships with pharma companies. At what point they come along, and what's the and I know I'm asking a lot of questions. Sorry, like I'm happy to repeat myself again. But at what point it makes sense to be acquired, and at what point it makes sense to just like file for IPO, right? Go public. How do you?
So here's the thing about the VCs. The VCs have a defined time period. All right.
Mhm, mhm,
In terms of their fund, they need to invest, they need to potentially help grow, and they need to sell and get out. That
Get out.
timeline is not the same timeline as a 10 to 15 year timeline for a biotech company to generate a product. So it's rare for a VC to come in on day one of a new biotech company that has a therapeutic focus and be with them throughout the entire time. Yeah. I mean,
Mm,
unless one of two things happens, I'll explain that in just a second. So
mm.
other thing you asked about the VCs, look, there's a need for VC money, right? There's a ton of cash out there that limited partners who are the financiers of the VC, they want to put their money somewhere. And they're also, a lot of them are altruistic and they want to do good things with the money. So, I personally spent most of my career now being venture capital dependent, meaning all these companies that I had to go knock on the door to get, that venture capital money. Even though I was still bringing revenues in through these little revenue programs that I created, it was never enough to cover the very expensive therapeutic development. So I was always venture capital dependent. And there are, the VCs, you really need to use them for more than just their money. It's a strong network. There's physicians there, there's PhDs, big network of people that can help you solve problems. And, I think I probably didn't use my VCs as well as I should have. And that's I guess the only advice I might have for some of the folks watching this is, if you are going to go get VC money, don't use them just for money. You really want a partner that's going to be there to support you, because you're both in it together. You both want to achieve the same thing. You both want to develop a therapeutic product, and you both want to get out at the end of the day. So now circling back to the timing. So with these VCs, a lot of them, if they're an early stage VC, they have to be in and out in 10 years, sometimes even earlier than that. And if our timeline for a new biotech therapeutic company is 15 years before we actually get the product, then I would say clashing, but your strategies are different. The VC is moving like this, and the therapeutic company is moving like this. Yeah. So now I'll try to answer your question better. Once the VC fund has to close, either they're going to start a second fund and then they will reinvest. That happens. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Or you IPO, or you exit through some sort of acquisition. That's usually where the pharma partners come in. If you're far enough developed in your therapeutic and your clinical programs, and you can sell that concept to a pharmaceutical company, and in fact, it was actually not a bad time to be selling to pharma companies, because they had been exclusively focused on small molecules, and then they started to think about what the cell therapy space and the stem cell space could be. So there was a lot of opportunity to sell companies to those folks, so that they would be taken in and then reinvigorated with cash, and then go forward with the clinical development and then the market approval process. So you have your VCs, which are going to start. Well, you have your angels, which are going to start initially your company. Then the VCs are usually your Series A. Then maybe you've got a Series B with a VC. Then maybe an acquisition or an IPO. But it's that early stage that you really have to be really careful about. And yes, the angel funding is interesting, but grants are something that I think people take for granted. It takes a long time to raise VC money. It takes 6 to 12 months often. Well, a grant can take that same amount of time. So I try to go both pathways is the only advice I might give to a new entrepreneur. Take the small grant money that you can. It's a lot of work. You do have to manage it, but at the end of the day, it is money that's coming in, and it's comparable to the revenue programs that I was talking about. Yeah. So we chose to come up with revenue programs, to come up with spin out companies, these life science tool, as opposed to spending our time and effort on grant writing. Yeah. So
I see.
That answered your question, but please ask
I think no, it does answer my question. There's a bunch of VC firms, right? And I feel like there's a bit of a VC inflation happening. And you've dealt with so many VCs throughout your career. When you're like, okay, I should avoid this VC, and when you're like, okay, this VC actually makes sense, I need to partner with them, right? Because I'm sure there's some sayings at the very beginning when you deal, it goes both ways, right? It's a mutual saying. It's not just you, it's not just them like sourcing and like looking at you and valuing you, but also you like looking at them, right? So yeah, that's the question.
So let me explain that, because I did have with the gene editing technology, that was very eye-opening for me because I was looking for VC money, and my approach, and again, only knowing that I love having revenue coming in. I love having that safety of revenue coming in.
Hmm.
This gene editing technology, I decided to develop it in a three-stage approach. Stage one was going to be developing a small life science tool that I could sell to companies that could do gene
Hmm.
editing, on the bench, and we make some money, get us going. Use that money to build a contract manufacturing business where we would then do the manufacturing, the actual gene editing manufacturing in sort of a gene modified cell product as a contract manufacturing business. And then from there, we would go into our own therapeutic programs. So that was the story. And I thought it was brilliant. The VCs didn't think it was brilliant because you have different VCs that are, I only focus on therapeutics. I only do oncology. I only do life science tools. So I found that as I was talking to these different VCs, I had to position the presentation in such a way that I was talking to the right people about the right topic. And so when I went in there initially and I just exploded with these three concepts and ideas, I was just turned off very quickly. If you're a therapeutic only VC, they're like, yeah, we don't care about the tools. If you're a tools only VC, yeah, we don't care about the therapeutics. So you have to know your audience. And the VCs are really, what's cool about them today, as opposed to say trying to raise money in the 80s, is these VC websites tell you exactly what they want. This is the therapeutic area I'm in. This is the kind of money that I want to put in. This is what I'm looking for in terms of a management team or technology. So you have to really do your research. And I presented to 300 VCs over the course of, it was a lot. But I mean, again, I learned a ton over that period. And by the end, I ended up slicing and dicing the concept into two different companies. One was a tools company, one was a therapeutic company. And at that point, I think I just sort of burned out. 300 VC meetings is a lot. So I think I burned out. And that's when my buddy from Biomedics and I contacted each other, and he said, would you like this job? And I said, yes, I would love to do that.
That's right. Just two quick questions. And first of all, just to clarify for myself, and I'm sure there are some viewers who will not know that too, what's contract manufacturing business exactly?
Yeah. So that's a company that does the manufacturing for a company. So like if a pharmaceutical company who has no experience in cell therapy, but they want to get into cell therapy, they can build it themselves or they can outsource it. And so if they outsource it, a contract manufacturing business is a business that has expertise in that particular manufacturing area, whether it's masks and gloves or cells or any other kind of product. So outsourcing to contract manufacturing it's a huge business. I mean, don't ask me the number, but it's massive. And so my thoughts were, and again, that's why, back in 2006, the liver stem cell company, I spun out this contract manufacturing division as a revenue generator for us, but also to learn, because we knew we were going to get into that therapeutic business anyway. And so we had a lot to learn about how to manufacture specific product. And we learned while we were providing therapeutic product, and that was just valuable to the entity. Yeah.
I see. So in the case of your gene editing tool, you would first create the diagnostic tool yourself, and then other companies would outsource the tool making to you, essentially, to do the gene editing tool making to you, right?
Exactly. So the concept with the gene editing technology was, can I create a small, bench top size device that would allow somebody to take a cell, open it up safely, inject whatever they want to inject, and then the cell is still alive. There's technologies out there that do that and then kill the cells. This technology was not going to do that. So I wanted to start small because that's what I had in front of me. I had this small, pilot device that I knew I could turn into a benchtop, easily sellable, low cost method for people to do transfection. So I thought if I do that, then if I can then take some of those profits and grow it, expand the device so that it becomes a clinical grade device where we could then, go out to another pharmaceutical company and say, we will manufacture your gene edited cells for you.
Oh, Okay, all right.
Right. So that was concept two in the three-stage approach to trying to raise money for this company. And then the third was, if
Ah,
once we get that experience doing the contract manufacturing, then we can go into our own therapeutic indications. We now have this device, we've got this nice laboratory, we have all the
mm,
people. Why don't we go into our own therapeutic programs? That was the concept.
I see. I see. Essentially, you were initially starting with technologies, and you would move to product itself, and then you would like use both of them to work on a therapeutic area indication,
You got it.
right?
Precise. You got it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just going back to your VC point, and a very quick question, you presented 300 VC firms in a year, which is I don't know how you managed to do that. It's a huge number, but in your those 300 presentations, what do you think was the most important? Was it your pitch deck? Was it the way you like it was the like I mean, obviously it's the idea and the person behind it is the main factors what VCs look at. But when you present, what do they like really pay attention? Is it the pitch deck? Is it like I, I've never presented, so I don't know myself. So I'm just curious about your opinions.
You really have to, it's two things, I think, and it's more than two things, but the two primary things are, is this the kind of manager or management team that I can
Mm,
work with? The VCs are asking that question, right? Can I work with these
I see.
people? Are they
Mhm,
open-minded enough to take our criticism or our feedback?
mhm,
Are they the kind of people that can actually sell the concept to the broader market? So these are the questions they're asking at the management team level. And then there's obviously the technology, which is the second and not below management team, but other critical factor. Um, you have to, those technologies have to be aligned with the VC's fund. So if you walk
mm,
into a VC fund that only works on oncology, and I'm walking in with some, I don't know, cell therapy that's not related to oncology, they're not even going to talk to
mm,
me, right? And so,
mhm,
the getting in the door was tough, but I used my networks from my business school and my previous,
mhm,
cell
mm,
therapy life to do that. And so I was able to get all of those appointments in about a year and a half, get them done over in rather in a year and a half, through networking. So I'm moving to a different topic, but network. It's very, very
network,
important.
network.
And
Mhm,
so the
I see.
man, but finishing up on this topic, it's management and the technology are the two critical things.
Two quick things. Um, raising financing also follows trends, right? Like you see now, AI is just booming. Everybody's creating an AI company. Sustainability is just through the roof, right? Everybody's creating a sustainability company. And I think 2020, when the COVID happened, then it was the biotech year, right? The biotech is it the bull market? What's called? I think in financing terms, just like so much money being invested in the biotech sector, and especially you saw a huge rise in mRNA technology, right? Bunch of mRNA companies, mRNA therapeutics, and all that. Um, so, in your personal opinion, since you've been dealing with this for such a long time, what what kind of indications, therapeutic indications, are hard to kind of raise funds for, or just like even gain interest in? I mean, I'm sure at the end of the day, like those companies, the people who invest, they want to make money, right? Profit, right? So there's certain indications I'm sure are not very profitable. So, but in your opinion, which ones are kind of like hard to really gain attraction for, and which ones do you think in the coming years will really rise to the top, right? In biotech.
All right, so there's two questions in there. So the VCs, they tend to run with trends. What's the
Yeah,
next? What's the big thing coming in? Back when I was in the cell therapy game in the early 2000s, that was, I mean, stem cell was it.
yeah,
Everybody was investing in stem cells. It was so
yeah,
easy to get money. So trends
yeah.
are very, very important, especially for the very big VCs. They tend
Mm,
to they tend to think that they're ahead of the game in terms of investing in particular
mm,
trends. And we've seen we've seen that crash and burn, especially definitely in the cell therapy space and stem cell therapy space. So
yeah.
so but that the second part of your question is, look, the technologies that are big right now and the trend today is AI. Everybody's doing it, and
Mm,
that's the same in my business. So we are constantly adding AI protocols and AI technology to our companies. Our companies are wet lab companies. We make these biological products, And we're now adding AI components and machine learning components to it, because that is helping to expedite the data that we're actually getting. Whether the data is good or bad, we still have to sort of sort that out. But AI is big right now, and if you have an AI component in your pitch deck, probably going to get an appointment, at least for the first meeting, right? And now, of course, cancer's big in terms of indications. Cancer's big, immunology is big, neuroscience is big. But again, I think, truly, to answer your question, I think I already did. It's the AI and machine learning component to it that is the sexy, attractive, draw that the VCs are looking for right now.
Looking for, yeah.
They'll have to change in 5 years, whatever the next big thing is.
I see. Mike, we're coming towards the end of our episode. I don't want to waste too much of your time. I know you're very busy. This was kind of like a mini MBA course personally for myself. I feel like I learned so much through just talking to you, and I feel like there's still a lot more to learn. But I don't want to take too much of your time. I guess just circling back to and going kind of towards the end of our questions. In terms of Biomed X, right? I know you started. What's the big goal and vision for Biomed X? What are the next big things? And I guess the final question would be, what advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs and executives in the biotech industry?
Got it. So with Biomed X, for us, this is a research institute. This is what we were founded on. And so our objective was to create, some entity that was going to be around not for 10 years that we then sell it off, but for hundreds of years. And the model that we use is one that when we define a challenge, a very difficult challenge that the pharmaceutical company is looking to solve, we put that out onto our crowdsourcing database. And the crowdsourcing database has, over 11,000 PhDs, all from the top institutions around the world, many of whom have at least one postdoc under their belt. So these are, mid-career academics who are not sure what their next step in life is going to be. They want to go into industry, or they want to stay in academia and go down the tenure track route. So that's our target population. So when we issue these challenges to the 11,000 people on the database, we'll get 300 to 400 responses. And these responses are 5 to 8 pages long, usually on average, and they are a solution to the problem. Okay. We then take those 300 to 400 applications, we winnow it down to the top 15 that have really, have defined a really cool or novel scientific idea, and we bring them into a week-long boot camp. On day one, we take the 15 people and we put them into 5 groups of 3. And we say, forget about that idea that you had. Throw it out the window. It was a nice academic idea, but it's not going to float. You 3 people need to get together over this intensive week and come up with a new solution that on Friday, at the end of the week, you're going to present to the heads of R&D at a giant pharmaceutical company who have potentially $500 million, a budget that they can spend, right? So it's got to be a really professional, well thought out, well scientifically detailed presentation. So these 5 teams of 3 over the course of the week, we have mentors. Biomed X folks are mentors. We've got the pharmaceutical company that's sponsoring the particular project. They're mentors. And we go around every 2 hours. We go around to these little rooms where the teams of 3 are, and we help them figure out solutions to whatever problems they're having to come up with the broader solution. And these folks are not sleeping. They are, maybe they get a couple hours a night sleep. It's that intense. And why that's important is the lack of sleep provides a couple of things. Number one, what your creativity can actually be driven when you are really super tired and you're sitting around a table with 3 people and you're like, I gotta sleep. Oh, a brilliant idea comes up. So that's one thing. The second thing is, we're looking for people that are open-minded, people that are able to modify an R&D plan without being offended by it. And when you're spending a week in this kind of intense scenario and you're not sleeping, the true you comes out. You can pretend to be a nice person in a 2-hour interview. Very difficult to not be yourself when you don't sleep.
Sure.
So we see that, and we actually will make decisions on, do we want to work with this person for the next 3 to 5 years? Because that's what these projects are. They're 3 to 5 years long. And once they're done, they move on to the pharmaceutical company. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I seem to have sort of gone a different way. But at the end of the day, what we're building are these technologies that are fundamentally different than any technology that exists today. And the pharmaceutical company will be able to utilize that technology to help improve patient lives. This is what we want to achieve. Yeah. So that's our goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so building a normal company with revenues and profits and selling the company after 10 years, which is the life I lived, this is a very different life for me. And so building this research institute that's going to be here for hundreds of years, that is what our objective is really not to sell anything. That said, we have found ourselves in situations where the technologies that we've developed are really big, so big that the pharmaceutical company, they can take it, but if they just use it themselves, the rest of the world doesn't, benefit from it. So we've in some instances, we've actually sub-licensed back the technology and spun out our own division where we can now provide a service offering to other pharmaceutical companies or other clients utilizing that technology, but carved out, a specific disease indication, or you can only use it for this thing or that thing, but you can't infringe or encroach on the sponsor's use of said technology, if that makes any sense. So we're building this long-term research institute, but at the same time, we're not going to let amazing technologies just sort of sit on a shelf somewhere in some pharmaceutical company if we can get agreement with the pharmaceutical company to allow us to do something positive with it to, again, help improve patient health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. It's like similar. I mean, a kind of analogy would be like a developing the COVID vaccine technology and kind of like giving it just to one pharma company and no one else benefits, right? So, especially when it comes to human health, I think you should be able to share, those technologies. And you've had a very long and successful career in biotech, and ins and outs of this sector. So, for aspiring people who want to be, first of all, I am curious. Do you think it's just more of a personal question? Do you think good managers are born or are they made? And the second question would be, if somebody wants to be a successful entrepreneur in biotech sector, what advice do you have for them?
All right. So question number one, are they born or made? Probably a little bit of both. I wouldn't say that I was a born entrepreneur. I was made into an entrepreneur because I had a mentor at the French biotech company who, for whatever reason, saw something in me and allowed me to understand how the different operations within a business were run. Yeah. And then the MBA, I think that just really helped me to look at the world differently. Hey, you're not the only game in town. There's a ton of bright people around you. Work with them, use them, collectively come up with a solution, right? So I that's what I think is the reason that I've been able to have all of these companies, is because I keep that in the back of my mind. I've worked with entrepreneurs before who they think they're alone and the rest of us are just here to collect the paycheck. I've worked with people like that. Those people fail. So you have to be open-minded. You have to surround yourself with good people, and you have to listen to them. So that's advice for anybody who's going out to start a company. Now, the advice for anybody, how to go out and do it. Wait, sorry, what was the second question?
My second question was like, for people who aspire to be, entrepreneurs in biotech field, right? What advice do you have them based on your long career in biotech?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need an idea. That's the first thing you need. You have to have a good idea. you have to do your homework. If that idea is already out in the market with 20 different competitors and your thing is not significantly better, you're just a
Hmm.
Me Too product, and you have to think about who's going to A, invest in it, and B, who's going to buy it, right? So,
Hmm.
so, so
Hmm.
I would, you have to have a good idea. You then need to, when you're building your business plan, bring in people that will look at the plan, shoot it down, tell you how bad it is, how good it is. Listen to people's advice, because there are a ton of people out there that have so much experience that if you're not egotistical, you will soak this information in and you will utilize that information. I think that's sort of part of the open-mindedness I was saying earlier. You need to be open-minded because you're going to be walking into these VCs asking for money. You'll get your money when you get your money eventually. And then you're going to have to take criticism all the time. You're going to have to take feedback all the time. And some of that feedback may be completely counter to what you think is the right path forward. As long as you're listening, take that information in, because you don't want a relationship with your investor to go sour. Because if it does go sour and the venture capital firm owns more equity than you own, guess what? You're just an employee at this point. So you're sayonara. So you do
Yeah.
have to, you have to, the circling back, you've got the technology, the idea has to be good. You have to be open-minded, and you've got to think about the appropriate management team when you're going out and sourcing capital from these VCs, because they've been doing this. They do this all day, every day. And in fact, one of the other pieces of advice I have is contact the VC, one that you actually want to submit your business plan to, or one that you don't care about submitting your business plan to, and present to them, practice with them, get feedback, because they do this all day long. All right. So for me, it is really about the open-mindedness. You have to listen to people, and then you can modify your pitch deck appropriately.
Mm. Mhm. So this is, I will definitely watch this episode once again because I feel like I need to like actually take down notes to remember certain things you said. And just very final thing. How do you said you had a French mentor? How do you find mentors? As somebody like me, right? Like I'm young. How do you go and find a mentor in the fields that you wanna, work in?
Yeah, I mean, look, you can find those mentors that are you can find people that have a really stellar reputation. They don't necessarily make a good mentor. They may just be extremely
Mm,
egotistical and they don't care about mentoring somebody. And even though they
mm,
may have a bunch of mentees, they're not truly mentors. A true mentor is somebody that really takes you into consideration and wants to help you grow. So to find
mm.
that kind of person, it's not like you can Google somebody like that. It's probably somebody that's tangential to you from your workplace, from people that you know. And then again, the mentor doesn't have to be specifically within your area of
Yeah.
expertise or industry. Um, but just talking to people, networking, getting out there, you may find that you'll have 10 mentors. This mentor over here is, the one mentor that you go to because they're an expert in finance. Oh, that mentor over there is really expert because they have, I don't know, they built a laboratory before, and you can
Yeah.
bounce questions off them. So,
Yeah.
don't think about one mentor. Think about having a collection of mentors, because not one
Collection.
mentor is
Yeah.
going to be able to deliver everything to you. Okay. So
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
find those areas where you have gaps in your expertise and your
Mm,
knowledge, and see if you can't fill them with those kind of
mm.
folks. Yeah, you have to find
I
them,
see.
but keep, network, talk to people. And if you ask somebody, I really could use some help in this area, most people are good. Most people will actually try to
Just
help
take it
you
down.
without asking for, I need a check, or give me, so
Yeah.
just, don't be afraid to ask people
Yeah.
for help. Okay. And then that
I see.
process,
Yeah.
just that process alone, may move you in the direction of becoming an actual mentor with whoever that person happens to be. Yeah.
I see. I see. Mark, thank you so much for your time, for your amazing wisdom. And I really enjoy talking to you and learning all this stuff. Again, I most likely I'll watch it again myself. But I appreciate your time again, and
Pleasure.
I hope you have a great day. And
Appreciate it,
I will see you
Javid.
around.
I'll see you around. I love this. I really appreciate it. I love talking, I guess, about myself and my past. So it's
No, it was
happy to have
great. It was
another
great.
call with you anytime. Right?
We'll definitely do that. Thank you so much. You have a fantastic
Take care.
day. All right.
Have a good
Bye
trip.
bye.